Good afternoon and welcome to today's segment of Martinis Eco Bites. Today we're talking about the fishing industry and the impact that a lot of environmental issues is having on our professional fishing industry. And our guest today is Adrian Lippi from Double Impact Fishing. Hi Adrian, how you doing?
Good afternoon, Martine. Hope you're well. What a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, it's great, mate. We had a few bands before, haven't we?
We have, yeah. Definitely not our first rodeo.
No,
and
it's not.
We just keep going, don't we?
It is indeed. Adrian was the creator of those amazing Vikings Go Home flags that we've had flying high all over WA and in the studio. Where is it somewhere?
Just up there to your left.
Oh, yeah, up the top there. Can't see. It's out of camera at the moment. But today we're talking about Adrian's industry, which is professional fisheries. Adrian, you're a wetliner?
Yep, wetliner, yep.
And so maybe you could give us a little bit of history and so people can comprehend sort of the history of professional fishing for wetliners in WA and other industries perhaps also to give a general understanding perhaps of how you are a professional fishing fisherman and your business and all the different things that have been impacting historically and where things are at now. Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I come from a commercial crayfishing family.
Mm-hmm.
Also primarily producing cattle farming as well.
Is that like just here near Perth?
In WA, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Crayfishing started up in Jurien Bay.
Beautiful.
With my father and my uncle.
Yeah.
Within the family, I had multiple cray boats all the way up the coastline.
Yep.
So I'd spend most of my time school holidays up at Jurien Bay. Back in the day, in the 80s, mid-80s, I'd got there on holidays and the town was electric.
Yeah.
It was the 80s, you know.
Absolutely.
Station wagons packed with surfboards, this, that. Everyone was getting
camping,
away.
Randoms everywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we get
you could do what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
But the town was strong because it had industry.
Yeah.
The caravan parks were busting at the seams because every bay was taken up in there and every tent bay was taken up in there as well.
Yep.
When I was really young, I'd wait on the jetty till my uncle would come in with a commercial crayfishing boat. And when they'd be fishing deep water, they'd come in with these massive deep sea crabs, which you couldn't do much with them. And he'd go, look, here's 10 in a bag. They're yours. Go and do what you want. So I'd go and do a lap around the caravan park and I'd get $2 each from them, but I wouldn't go back for a few more days because you knew those crabs were tough. They were hard. So you didn't really want to come across a person that really bought them off you because they're not like a blue manna crab.
Yeah, exactly.
They're full of armor. But those were the days along the coastline where there was industry. Every coastal town was just pumping at the seams. It was great. So
pretty much if we go back historically all through WA, you've got all of those really towns that are based on tourism and fishing, like rock lobster and wetlining, crayfishing, even let's be honest, like there was this blend of anything that's seaborne. So even people that were like windsurfers, surfers, all of that was the mix back then.
That's right.
It was like so based on this really lovely balance of having a solid community, but tourism as well, right?
Absolutely, because it was, the summers in WA are the best. And like you said, it attracted every water sport, the fishermen. Back then there weren't a lot of recreational boats.
Yeah, right.
So, moving on from that, spending a lot of time in those coastal towns, watching them grow and at their maximum capacities back then. I would watch the crayfishing industry growing up and there were so many highs and lows.
Yeah.
And I've always been the sort of person my whole life, even as a youngster, I would always be in two minds.
Yeah.
And I would always think, how could that be?
Yeah.
Or how could a government make those restrictions because it's primarily producing and you guys are there for the benefit of our country.
Yeah. You're feeding the nation.
And we're feeding other countries. We're feeding, Japan and we're China, wherever they're sending them back then. And, they'll just, say one country only buys them. And I just think, well, why is that?
So maybe you can just give it, for a lot of people that haven't got any idea of what wetlining is, maybe you can give a bit of a description of actually, because we know that you grew up with rock lobster industry as well with your family, but getting into wetlining, what is wetlining. A lot of people are like, I have no idea. Sounds a little bit weird and a little bit, risque. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So wetlining is wet fishing.
Yep.
Basically, back in the day when you're crayfishing, you could throw a rope over with a big chunk of steel on the bottom, and you would have, say, 10, 15 hooks running up the rope from the bottom.
Yep.
With hooks on it.
Yep.
And you'd be wet fishing for demersal, scalefish, snapper, jewfish, WA jewfish,
yep.
Borch and groper,
yep.
all that sort of stuff to supply to the local market.
Yeah, right.
So basically, these days, it's all been split up into its own fisheries.
Yes.
You got rock lobster. Now they can't go wet fishing.
Yep.
You got the wet fishing industry, which is my industry now.
Yep.
That's what I do. And then you got all your others branching off from that, your long lining, crabbing, all that sort of stuff as well.
So I guess a lot of people would say, have you seen yourself a bit, apart from the fact that like we just talked about is the division of the licensing and the industries themselves, what have you noticed in the distribution of species? Have you had a change? Maybe even break down for people at certain times of the year, because people that like to know more about fishing.
Yeah.
I have a bit of a understanding with my background in environmental science and studying marine science. But for people that don't, maybe you can give a bit of a breakdown as like during the year, what kind of species do you have that congregate more in that area, or they come up and down the coastline? If you could break that down, maybe people understand that.
Yeah, so sort of what we're facing at the moment is, the big unsustainability card. Obviously, there's a lot more boats out in the water, not commercials because we've been reduced so much, but a lot more recreational boats, like from the 80s and stuff like that. It's become a passion for people to go out, catch their own food.
Yes.
They want to hunt, they want to catch.
So at the moment, what kind of fish are you getting when you go out?
So we target WA jewfish, pink snapper, Borch and groper, break sea cod.
Beautiful.
They're the four that we target.
Okay. And then obviously that is because the area that you're fishing in, because your license pretty much says that's what species is dominant there, right?
Yeah. So the license that I hold, they're the species that entitles us to be able to catch. But those top four, they're the ones that are under threat most.
Yeah, right.
Because that's what everybody's targeting.
Yeah, right.
So...
And that's because, how the price of jewfish, if you go and find it locally and locally sustainably sourced. This is the thing, is like we want it to be sustainable. We want it to be local and fresh.
Yep.
So unfortunately, this is what we're going to have to pay for, because we're going for quality food. And either we're looking at quality. The thing is that there's been massive changes that have impacted not only your industry, but obviously many other primary industries in Australia and WA. So going back to the licensing, what changes, as you've mentioned, have happened historically, apart from all the fisheries being divided up into wetlining, rock lobster, and now we've also got amazing octopus industry, which is great, a really sustainable one, an award.
Yes.
So what can you tell us or tell our viewers here today that's happened with your licensing? What have been real challenges? What have been big changes?
Yeah, so in our sector, even the charter sector, they've cut 80% of the charter boats out and have said, from the last couple of years, now we're introducing a tag system.
Okay, so let's just pause there for a sec.
Yes.
Charter. Okay, charter fishing is where all of you people that love, you blokes and ladies out there that like to go and do some charter fishing. Did you hear that? 85% have been stopped. That's a massive impact for tourism alone, right?
Yep.
Tourism, and the fact that these small regional communities along our coastlines here, they would have been owned by obviously small business owners like yourself and others that have lived in these areas for a long time. 85% has a reduction in that.
Yep.
Wow, that's immense. So which means that people being able to go out, even if they don't have their own boat, but go out and do a bit of a charter for the day, that availability is really dropped
Absolutely.
down. Which means then, because there's such a small amount that can do it, they can pretty much dominate whatever price they want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Which then the price for that license, that permit, if it was 80, 90,000, it's worth 10,000 now.
Wow.
So again, it's just crushing to see small businesses, small coastal town businesses hit the wall again, as we've seen coastal towns hit the wall over the years through industry disruption.
So what do you think caused that massive reduction in that small charter industry? What was it that they say? How were they justifying taking those licenses away? Because ultimately they would have done that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Saying you're not going to renew your license because when it comes up for renewal, sorry, you're not in the.
No. So what
happens there?
Yeah, what the story is with that? Well, again, the big word is unsustainability. Okay. So
they're using okay. So we have all of these sustainable practices and this framework
absolutely
to make sure that we have sustainable fisheries in Australia, but they've used that as a precedent of reducing the licenses.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And that's a knock-on effect through the whole industry, all industries.
When did that start? When did that happen?
That would have been 2023. What do I know? 22, end of 22.
22.
Yeah. So it's been 12 months now, 18 months now. So basically, the fisheries minister come out and said, okay, we're changing the rules now.
So this sits within that same framework where a lot of other things that were being shut down and locked out in Australia. So we know about the mandates, all that stuff. So people go, well, why are you connecting this? Let's move on from this. If we're seeing that there's a pattern here, I think that it's time to do a bit more of a deep dive as to why these issues are connected. And so this is what I predominantly want to bring to the table is helping people connect those dots. And so in this, being able to feed your family and have affordable, really good quality protein to put on the table to sustain your family and keep us healthy and strong, as well as have strong and sustainable, not only industries, but communities. And this is what it's about.
Absolutely.
And so this is why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing. So in that 85% reduction, how did that impact, do you feel, those communities? Jurien Bay, Lancelin, Lehman.
As far as the fishing tour operators in those towns, there was only probably a few in those towns, but they did a good job.
Absolutely.
Places like Jurien Bay, because like when I was saying in the 80s, and I was quickly go back to that and reiterate, when that industry was there, it was strong.
Yes.
Then when the bans come in, the restrictions come in so hard on the lobster industries, all those coastal towns, north of Lanston, really copped it.
Yeah, right.
Jurien Bay, there was no industry left.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went back up there about 10 years ago and set myself up there with some real estate and things like that, numbers were just starting to come back. But there wasn't industry, it's retirees.
Yeah.
They're sort of because that's a gateway for the caravanners to head north.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of FIFOs and that getting up there and a lot more wreck fishers.
Yeah.
But there's still, there's probably 3 of us wetliners up there and a handful of crayfish.
Okay. So what we're seeing is that not only is there an impact on recreational fishing because the charters were culled.
Yep.
Now has there been a reduction in wetline licenses?
Yeah, absolutely.
How much?
Yeah. So, so we work on units, which is 1 unit is 1 hour.
Yeah.
Used to be 1 hour. Now it's 1 hour's worth 40 minutes. And then
how do you go from 1 unit is 45 minutes and not an hour now?
That's right, because we don't work in quota. Our quota is sort of in time. So now they're proposing another 10% cut on the 40 minutes again,
so down to 35 minutes.
Yeah. And maybe even to 30 minutes.
People should be outraged.
We are absolutely outraged.
Because isn't this going to have a massive effect on how much it's going to cost to buy those fish?
Absolutely.
People, you need to be on this. Get onto your ministers and get onto the Minister for the Department of Fisheries. Hello.
But what people got to understand is, they say, oh, it's commercial fishing. They go out and they do this. We can't just go out and do this. We're always dealing with the weather.
Yeah.
Okay. We go out where we go. It's the last place on earth to get calm. Right. And it's the first place.
I've been there. I know.
It's the first place in the afternoon to get rough. Yes. So you have a very small window.
It's rough. It's calm. It's rough.
Absolutely.
And then it's rough as guts.
That's right. And you know what? Even if you're out there and it is a nice day, you can drop your lines and you've got a screaming undertow.
Yeah.
Which means the fish just go off the bite.
Yes.
So that in itself is a huge hurdle.
So this is the thing that people don't comprehend. Like they go and look at a piece of fish when they're going to buy it. And that's the other thing too. Has there been a crackdown on the fact that local fisheries can actually sell direct from you? Can you supply them, or what is the impact? So I know that there has been a big change in some of that as well.
Well, our industry, we're very fortunate that we can sell basically to anyone.
Beautiful.
Which is good.
Is there other industries though in fisheries that they can't?
Yeah, so the crayfishing industry.
Oh, only that.
It's heavily policed, and it was only since the COVID and since China's not taken the crayfish anymore.
Yeah, now they are. They've just been reversed
now they are
last
again.
week, wasn't it? 2 weeks ago? Yeah.
All of a sudden they got their appetite back for crayfish, which is good, great for the industry.
Absolutely.
But even during those times, I think fishery said, okay, well, we'll allow the commercial crayfishermen to sell, I don't know, 30, 50 or 100 kilos of crays off the back of their boat.
Yeah.
Which again, I don't understand.
Yeah.
They've spent the millions of dollars investing in that.
Yeah.
So why is it so regimented where they got to sell those crayfish just to a co-op? Or
okay, so this is where we come back to joining the dots about control of where our food source comes from and food source is going to, and what's not only sustainable for the actual industry itself, but what's also sustainable for being able to be available to everyday Australians. This is what has always grinded my gears, is that I've seen the price of fish go up. I kind of worked in that industry for a while, and I would see it. And now from 5-6 years ago, what I can see the prices even now is like astronomical increase.
Look, at the end of the day,
and this is not because of these guys. They're not the responsible. It's been the flow-on effect by all the insanity made by those ridiculous people that sit over in Canberra making rules and regulations, as well as in this state that let this happen.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about one of the big ones for me, which impacts you heavily, about restrictions and the way that you can conduct yourself on the ocean, which is about MARPOL. So we're going to go to a quick little thing here. And MARPOL, if you'd like to give a bit of a breakdown in a minute, is the regulator for mostly shipping to do with shipping vessels or ocean-based vessels, and they have really strict laws internationally and in Australia.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to that now. So maybe you can have a talk through what MARPOL is. So this is it implemented in Australia.
Yeah. So MARPOL was introduced in the early 70s. It was a convention introduced to keep the oceans free from all pollutions.
Yeah, keep them clean and well regulated.
Absolutely. The way the ocean should be. Respect it. We don't own it. We don't live in it.
Yep.
So if we're going to harvest it, if we're going to
have an impact,
trade across it over the world globe, we got to respect it.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay. And what lives in that area. So,
I mean, anyone who's been to Bali can understand why you have things like MARPOL in place.
Absolutely.
But then you also see what washes up on the beaches in Bali, because it's surrounded by ocean, and you can see that there are obviously people that are not quite abiding by that.
Yeah, absolutely. More the same. We went to Malaysia last year as well. I'm doing a beautiful jet ski tour a few miles off the coast to amazing islands and the rock structures in the ocean where the water's washed under them. Just picturesque, but it's a floating tip.
So maybe we can bring this one up. And this is talking about the 6 aspects that MARPOL looks after about pollution. So I don't know if we can bring that up any larger. Let's have a look. Okay, we can't. I'm going to see if I can go through this myself. And so the first one is here is regulation of the prevention of pollution by oil.
Yep.
That's a good one, because that would include a lot of industries. It's mostly for shipping, but let's be honest, when it comes to oil, let's only have to Exxon Valdez. That's the one that pops into my head quite well. So I'm intrigued how these international regulators or international laws are being implemented. So in Australia, it's AMSA. Is that right?
AMSA, yes.
Okay.
Australian Maritime Shipping
Association. So they look after the implementation of the MARPOL regulations and act, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one is also regulation for the prevention of pollution by harmful substance carried by sea in packaged forms. That's interesting. Oh, sorry, I just skipped there. That was number 3. Then we have we'll go back to number 2. My apologies there. It's like regulation for the control of pollution by noxious liquid substances in bulk. Oh, this is a juicy one for us here in WA that we've been up in arms about when we were talking about liquefied green ammonia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh, we will get to that soon. Because if you're talking about toxic substances, we are talking about instant and total death of an aquatic system when it comes to leakage of that. So number 4, regulation for the prevention of pollution by sewage from ships.
Yep.
So we can understand that. Sewage, look, I think that as much as we don't want it in the ocean, when it comes to the hierarchy of what's toxic and has a terrible impact, well, it's not ideal. And we know that people chuck things down into sewage areas that shouldn't be there. So regulation for the prevention of pollution by garbage from ships. Okay. Bali and, as we said, just Malaysia and stuff, we can see that all those islands out there are the congregation areas. So, I mean, I look along our beaches, mostly in Australia, and we have some of the cleanest beaches and oceans in the world.
Absolutely beautiful beaches.
I would say that I've had this argument, it's a flat out troll fest on Facebook sometimes where some into it, it's not pristine. Our oceans are not pristine. And I'm like, have you traveled much?
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you actually been out there and seen what the rest of the world oceans look like?
Yeah.
Because I would say that that we do have the most pristine oceans and beaches in the world.
We do. The fact that very limited amounts of things ever wash up.
Yep.
You may get, clay pot floats and clay pot lids, on a big swell or something like that. But even when we're out there all the time, if there's something, we'd pick it up, but very rarely you see a cardboard box floating or anything like that. It's very clean.
Oh, we know what we would be looking out for, especially, and we're seeing what's happening on the east coast of the USA.
Concrete
we'll talk
bollards.
We'll have a chat about that in a minute. Regulation for the prevention of air pollution from ships. Well, I would say that if you're looking at the hierarchy, the way that they're listed, this is indicating what it is. Pollution by oil. Then we've got noxious liquids. Well, I'd say that Annex at 1 and 2 are a bit of a crossover there.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how it's implemented in a big thing. But also, you guys, you've mentioned before that you can't so much as drop a little plastic lid over the.
Now, basically for us, it's zero tolerance, and it's good because we would not want to do that.
Of course.
To start with.
Of course.
We're out there to harvest.
Yeah.
And we're out there to keep the ocean clean.
Yeah, exactly.
Industry clean, the ocean clean.
Absolutely, being responsible. So the thing is that for me, I'm going, if we have all of these measures, this framework in place already, and we have such stringent laws. So could you tell me that if there is an incident and you have to report, it's mandatory reporting, is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so it's mandatory reporting. What is the process in some of that? Have you had to do that before?
No, been fortunate enough, never had an incident.
Awesome.
Don't really know any fishermen that really have had any incidences.
Wow.
Our oceans are pretty good here. There's no
Look, I would have to say over the last 20 years, things have really cleaned up as far as accountability and sustainability.
Yep.
I know that 2 or so decades ago, things were a little bit not so great as far as balance on the sustainability or bringing together the correct information, data, and science.
That's right.
And that's the thing, is that there wasn't enough being investigated to make sure that we had a big overall picture here and how they all join the dots.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the big thing. There's been a lot of better consultation. So that's interesting, consultation with the people. That's not something that this government no. But we're irrelevant over here in WA, especially rest of Australia is so much as well. So looking at Marpole, yes, absolutely. I'm going to go now to our video footage from our lovely compadres, and I would say that Warriors in Arms on the east coast of the USA that are undergoing the impact of offshore wind turbines. And this is how we need to see now the impact of this for the whole marine environment and how it affects industries like Adrian. And this gentleman is a fisherman from the US, and this is our Facebook video here. We're going to go to this now.
See the field where the turbines are being built? This is the area 30 miles away that the styrofoam and the fiberglass shards that are showing up on the Cape and Islands and Newport and Westport and even further south are all coming from. Right here, we have the thing that nobody talks about, the real nightmare of this project. This is a 560-foot tall transformer substation which has over 180,000 gallons of transformer oil in it. When it lets loose, it will go to the exact same beaches, the exact same marshes, the exact same fishing grounds and shellfish beds that the styrofoam and fiberglass shards are still drifting up on here a month later. This needs proper attention. It is not being paid attention to. People really need to pay attention because there's going to be over 10 of these.
Whether that be professional fisheries, and then the shipping channels. Yep. They've tried to account for that. But then, of course, we're talking about the interruption of the whole ecosystem. And this is where we know that ongoing, the multitude of effects that it's going to have on our fisheries is perhaps a diabolical situation.
Absolutely.
That, yeah, again, no consultation. Were you consulted by the federal government, Adrian?
No,
you weren't.
Never, ever. Never, ever.
I'm so shocked. Can you see the shock on my face, Adrian?
And you know what the thing is too? How many rallies have I been to and done speeches, and for the amount we're getting crucified by fisheries because it's unsustainable, and how many speeches I've done at rallies and invited the Minister of Fisheries.
The Minister of Fisheries himself.
Accountable, unaccountable times to join us to say, well, it's unsustainable. We can't have these in there because there will be nothing left.
Yeah, just for the record, the Minister for Fisheries, John Punch, has actually put on record in writing that offshore wind turbines are not viable in the foreseeable future.
Oh, that's good.
So he's made that statement, and yet his entire party is still, and the federal government is still pushing forward. The impact that this is going to have, this industrialization of our oceans, because the thing is, it's just not offshore wind. There are other industries that want to get in.
Yep.
And this is where we're like, wait up. There's no consultation. And where's the long-term impact assessments? We're seeing that from that footage here. We've had multiple blade failures. And those offshore wind turbine in
Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's been observed all the way up to Canada, some of the debris.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, if we're talking about Marpole, and you guys can't even drop over a plastic lid off a water bottle, what do you think the impact should be for this kind of an act on these industries? Like, let's be honest about this. Like, that should be shut down and a whole review, correct?
Okay.
That's what would happen if it was you.
Absolutely.
If there was an incident where you crashed into something, caused a massive demolition, and there's debris all up and down the coastline of Western Australia, what would be the impact for you, Adrian? Just give us a rundown.
Yeah, you'd be dragged into the high courts straight away.
Yep.
It would be massive lawsuits put on you. But just, to put things into proportion, just so the viewers on a really smaller scale can see what we're up against. Like, if we're in a marina and we're refueling our boats, we need to let the authorities and people around know that we're refueling.
Yep.
So we need to put up a refueling flag.
Yep.
Okay. We need to have soaker pads and buckets.
Yep.
Almost at hand, ready to go.
Yep.
Now, if something happened and 2 or 3 liters went overboard, out the scuppers into the water, you'd have to clean them up straight away. You'd have to contact the authorities in that marina.
And what authorities would you be contacting, Adrian?
So you'd be.
What would you be? Is it AMSA that you have to contact?
Yeah, first would be port authorities.
Port authority.
So say if it was Hillary's, you'd be calling port authorities saying, okay, just filled the boat. There's been a few liters gone into the water.
Yep.
We've soaked up what we can. We're reporting it. Then we may, depending on the spill, we may have to go to AMSA. They may call AMSA and report that, and then so forth. But I mean, that is such a minute scale.
Wow.
When we're talking turbines in the ocean, that carry gear or oil.
So we're talking about 900 gallons of oil, lubricant, per offshore wind turbine. Then we have those big substations that we're just seeing in that video from the US. So what we're basing on, what we believe is going to be implemented in Western Australian waters and Australian waters, is the same type of setup.
Yep.
And the reason we say that is because still it's all very conceptual. So these concepts are being put in our oceans, no consultation, very little experts having to have their input. I mean, the fact that there is an inquiry, which is great, because I still haven't found out. That's my next go-to. I'm in the process of finding out whether this is the first time an inquiry has gone into an industry before it's even got up off the ground. We're going to just show a quick map. It's a very basic map, but this map of WA is going to show all the areas where there's proposed offshore wind turbines. And then we're going to have a little look here. Wow. So Geograph Bay and Mylap, that's called Bunbury Offshore. But I mean, it stretches the whole way out past Cape Naturalist. And people would say there's absolutely no way they're going to put it out off Dunsborough. And I said, you bet your cotton picking boots they are.
Yeah.
So let's have a chat about here. So we've got Geograph Bay all the way up to Mylap. Then we've got Lancelin. We've got the back of Rottnest. That was an area that was pre-selected by the federal government. There's a number of other areas that are sitting there, but these are the major ones that have been indicated. Lancelin, so that's Jurien Bay as well. So Lancelin, Jurien Bay, and then we've got the massive area of Dongara. Dongara passed up way past Geraldton, and that just comes short of Kalbarri and the Kalbarri stretch that goes up towards Shark Bay. Now, all of those areas, let's have a chat about the fishing industries along there. This is, I would say, what percentage, by looking at this, would be a capture of the professional fisheries in WA for rock lobster, wetliners? So we've got octopus industry. And what other industries do we have out there as far as fisheries?
So you'd have your commercial crayfishing.
Sorry, there's squid.
Your squid,
yeah,
they're more of a inshore sort of thing.
Yeah.
Your
but would this be the take zone that goes from Cape Naturalist up just past Kalbarri? How much of the percentage there would you see is the areas that we take fish from, or our protein sources from the ocean?
Yep.
How much would percentage you reckon in those zones? Is that area cover maybe about 50, 60, 70%?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where we're really concerned. This is what we've had a chat about
That's
before.
right.
And I do go and mention this a lot, because when you're having massive impact on species and we don't know what the long-term impact is going to be. So cutting through reef systems and segmenting populations,
Yep.
Restricting their movement along and impacting the way that the currents flow. You just said that.
That's right.
The currents need to flow a certain way so that all the species can migrate, mate, molt, and spawn in the way that they need to. So we know that by having impact on all of this, is going to have an impact down the line about how much you can catch, where your catch rate is going to be impacted, what zones you can go into. Do you think there could be more about restrictions going on here? Because for me, it was like there was like flashing lights going off, and not just visualizing those flashing lights in the ocean at night from those offshore wind turbines, but also flashing lights in my head going, I have a problem here, Houston, because I think that what we're going to see is that you guys are going to be restricted to the areas that you can get access to. And not just that, but we know that the impact of high voltage underwater cables, we go on and on and on. And then there is the pollution factor. So if we're looking at all of that, what are your concerns as a professional fisher?
Well, another really big one is the turbines are direct cooling. So, you know, they're like an outboard motor. So
direct cooling means that they take cool water direct from the ocean and they dump it straight back into the ocean.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you've got 8,000 square kilometres of these things, you're going to raise the water temperature by 4, 5, 6 degrees.
Yeah.
Okay.
I might be incorrect, but the salinity level increases also on the outtake. So so you're going to have a change in salinity.
Yeah. So I mean, like in the 80s, you know, there was documentaries in Africa, and you only got to Google it. You know, crayfish beaching themselves in Africa, and it will come up, and the beaches are full. There's millions and millions of crayfish just piling up on top of each other. And it's because the ocean temperatures rise about 5 or 6 degrees.
Wow.
Taking the oxygen out of the water.
Yeah. Okay. So that's another thing that offshore wind turbines do, is they actually deoxygenate the surface water. These are all the things that aren't being released. But if you do a deep dive, please don't use Google when you're doing your research. Go and use a search engine like Yandex or Brave. There's a number of others that are out there that aren't going to be heavily censored with algorithms. Yeah. I always try and use Yandex, because even though the algorithms are still sort of a little bit active, they don't fully block like they do here in Australia with Google, Chrome, that kind of stuff. So if you're going to go and do that and do your research and look at the massive impact that they have. And so I am really concerned then, because there's been such a reduction in charters, there's been such a reduction in your licenses and quota. There's obviously been other industries that obviously you may not be able to talk about it because it's not exactly yours. With the rock lobster, hopefully we can have someone come on and have a chat about that and the impacts that the rock lobster has had to endure over many decades and the impact of that. I mean, the cost of putting your vessels out in the ocean alone is extremely high. People can't even fathom how much it costs just to get your boat out in the water.
That's right.
So talking about that, where do you think this really needs to change and be addressed? Because there are major concerns about locked out areas because they are very large areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've seen over my course of my life, this is a journey of a timeline.
Yeah.
And it started 20, 25 years ago.
It did.
Right now we're at the impact point.
Yeah.
Right now, which equals wind turbines.
Yeah.
So when I was saying about Durin and all those coastal towns, you know, thriving in the 80s and they're not, it's because the restrictions were so hard, the fleets were getting reduced.
Yeah.
And obviously they're getting reduced for a reason.
Of course.
And right where we are now, it's very evident. You can see it very clearly that all commercial fishing is fading out.
Yeah. So, and there is such a push by individuals that's supposed to be looking after your industry saying that's no longer sustainable. Well, we have got footage after footage after footage, especially in the Geograph Bay area and up and down the coastline, saying that this the population has increased from so many endemic demersal fish. Like we have got jewfish numbers that are off the charts and they're big too.
Yeah, and they're all schooling down there and you know, the schools are 40, 50 in a school.
So this talk of it's not sustainable and that there's been this massive impact on population and that they're not sustainable, I call garbage to that. I'm trying to be polite today. Total BS, that there's not. And we're going to delve into that more because I've got a few more interviews coming up with people from down that way that are professional, semi-professional fishing men, fishing women that have got video footage and data sets that we're going to look at that are going to prove this as well. The thing that I'm really concerned about is not only from offshore wind turbines, but also this nature positive marine parks. So this nature positive has got nothing to do with sustainability. So the words in there, they might say, oh, for the sustainability, but it's actually not, because then they want to put other industries into those areas. So this is where I have had that conversation with many people going, look, there's been an extension of the Marmion Marine Parks. It's going right the way up. And where does that butt right up to? The very bottom end of where the offshore wind turbine area is for that area going up to Lancelin.
Correct.
So if people can't see, this is a no-take zone. So not only is it no-take for professional fishing to go into that area, but it's also a no-take zone for you, mums and dads and your kids and your uncles that want to take your kids out and show them how to fish and look after themselves and be sustainable in their practice, have connection to food. That's another thing. And a sense of empowerment and being able to go and feed yourself.
And the thing is, you know, you get a lot of grandparents that will own a little boat and they'll take the dinghy out with their grandchildren. They might go 1 mile, 2 mile out and get a feed of herring, you know, just in front of the reef, nice and calm. Beautiful. That will be abolished.
And this is what I see. Not only is this a travesty on this whole preventing people from being able to forage and feed themselves, because that's what it is. It's a basic human right to be able to feed yourself. At no point in the 70s and 80s could you have imagined you go down and you're crabbing or fishing and having like your usual holiday fun, and you won't be able to do that unless you're either licensed or in a take area.
That's right.
Because this isn't a marine park, so it's nature positive, but we don't care about the fact that you're actually going to catch whatever you want to feed yourself with and you can take it home and your family enjoy it. And this is where it's really, really concerning that these marine parks that are also being implemented are to lock out people from being able to take from the ocean, feed them families.
The biggest concern about, you know, these massive marine parks they're implementing is it's a foreign corporation out of America,
Pew,
which has jurisdiction over our oceans. locking
And
them
let's
up.
talk about the percentage. In the US, Pew is locking at, is it 4%?
2 to 4.
2 to 4%.
They will not push anymore because they say it will affect the recreational and commercial fishing in the States too much.
Because they have such large zones of offshore wind turbines going in as well. So we see that. How much are they trying to implement here in
Well,
Australia?
they want to have a crack at 25%.
25%.
Of our waters.
25% of our oceans are going to be locked off for mums and dads and families and grandparents that want to teach their grandkids and their family members how to feed themselves, to prevent them from having the right to go and get food.
So the thing is, if they're creating these marine parks for sustainability, but they're still going to push the turbines, it just totally contradicts what they're saying.
They do.
Because the time the blades hit the water, the carbon fibre shards disperse, the same as like they're doing Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, they'll be straight into those marine parks.
The beaches are shut.
They butt it right straight up.
The water temperature goes up by 5-6 degrees. All your pelagic fish, which is your tuna, your dolphin fish, etc., that live on top, they won't come down in the currents because it's no oxygen. Your bottom demersal fish have been desecrated because the footings of the turbines, which are 200 square metres of concrete, have desecrated them.
Yeah.
So the ocean will totally be destroyed. It will be a no-go zone for everybody.
What I don't understand is this absolute paradox of implementation, and it's absolute pure ideology. It's not based on sustainable practices. It's not based on what experts would tell you is the best thing for practices. And then we've got precautionary principle. That's all. Precautionary principle is being thrown out the window because what we're seeing is that they're wanting to implement all of these experiments like the floating offshore wind. Don't even get me about solar. Oh my God, that is diabolical. But the offshore floating over in the East Coast, Illawarra, big success that's been knocked on the head this week. Yay. But Port Stephens and the Hunter, they're offshore in deep water. They're floating. It's the biggest in the world, which means it's an experiment on us. And if that experiment goes bad, what's the implications? Well, when the southern current is flowing up there, I cannot believe all the hoo-ha that was made, and I'm not dissing this, but the protection of the Great Barrier Reef. The protection of the Great Barrier Reef, it was so important, and it was like under the tourist eye, and it's like, well, we have reef systems all through Western Australia, especially in the area.
Beautiful Ningaloo Reef.
Yeah, but we've got the limestone reef system all through Geograph Bay.
Yeah, we do,
and all up the coastline, which is the habitat for the rock lobster, which is the habitat for all these endemic demersal fish.
That's right.
Which is what you get your money from as a commercial fishing.
Where you'll find the crayfish, you'll find the jewfish above it.
And they like healthy reef systems.
Very.
Let's not get this muddled up at all. They're only going to exist there because these are pristine reef systems. Pristine. So we want to put all this protection in for the Great Barrier Reef, but bugger the rest of the reef. But the way that we're going to protect it is to lock it out from everyone, not take from that because we're going to make it into marine parks, or right next to it, we're going to have industrialization. So it's going to be a patchwork of industrialization, total catastrophe, destroying the whole reef system. And then next to it, no one's going to go there. And I don't think that those that sit there in their little palace over in Canberra comprehend about the way that marine species work.
No,
that they don't just stay in an area. It's like, that's your patch here. We've got to put a little signage. You're going to have to move further up.
Yeah.
You can't be here because this is not the area you're supposed to be in. You need to be up there. It's a bit like the area that they've defined for Geograph Bay. They've put a great big slip through zone. Yep. Oh, that's for shipping. Yep. And I'm like, okay, so shipping has the biggest impact on whales. Yep. For a start, and to condense it down into that area, which is the absolute migration zone.
Pathway.
It's the migration area. Not just that, but that area down there is also the birthing and nursery area for Geograph Bay.
Yep.
The insanity in all of this is not lost on any of us. Those that live here, those that know the waters out here, look at that mob over there in the east. In Canberra and think they're absolute psychopaths. Yeah. And I use that word. Yeah. I do, because what you're saying is that we're going to save the planet by destroying all of these habitats. Habitat destruction
Yeah.
was the number one thing we were looking after. But you know, when we're talking about ecology, sustainability, and then we want to destroy it, but then we're going to bring it back with artificial reefs. Well, don't destroy it in the first place.
Absolutely.
Have we not learnt? And this is where my brain flip-flops, and I think that the world has been continually run by psychopaths, people that have no real life experience, that don't have conversations with blokes like you, that don't have conversations with chicks like me, that are salty ones that are out there watching the whales breach off the beach in Dunsborough every day that I can. So no one's out there listening to these people, listening to those that are involved in ecotourism and businesses in all of these areas, and asking them, what's going to be the impact? We've already kind of get an idea. We've already seen what the pattern has been, and that's exactly what they want. They do want to destroy these areas. So we're coming up to the very end here. We've been having the most amazing chat. Thank you so much, Adrian.
It was my pleasure to come here. And
what a ripper.
Hopefully we've, opened up
and for those people that want to, absolutely. And those people that want to know more, please give us feedback. Send in some messages about what you want to see more information on regarding the impact on our fisheries and our marine environment in WA, making sure that our beautiful coastal areas are protected not only from the marine spectrum and making sure our waters are beautiful, clean and protected and stopped from being industrialized, but also let's start looking after our communities in these coastal areas that really need our support.
That's right, absolutely.
We need to be looking after tourism. We need to be looking after these industries so they can be sustainable. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Have a great
Pleasure.
day.
Thank you.
Cheers.